That's what we do in the theater.
That is the one.
Huh?
I see, yeah.
Actually, we can direct some questions to them and then look at them quietly and then move on.
That's what we expected.
I will answer on his behalf.
Okay, sure. We'll each have to answer on his behalf at some point. That's how it's going.
Did you get a text from him or anything?
The what?
Did you get a text from him or anything?
No.
It's not.
Maybe he thought it was the other theater asylum.
The other one, yes.
I'll make a
all right.
note of it.
In Toronto.
Yeah, the one in Toronto.
That's right. All right. Thank you all for coming out at 10:30 a.m., which for theater folk is the crack of dawn. And I hope you got some bagels and donuts and coffee and whatnot over there. It's all for your enjoyment. We have some Bitter Lemon swag over here. You're welcome to come by and grab some of it after the show if you so choose. And thank you guys so much for coming out here. I really appreciate it. This is always a kind of a cool panel we have here, and as we attempt to sort things out and usually find out that nothing is going to be saved. So let me introduce these fine folks over here. Let's see. Over here on the end we have Pauline Adamic. I got it right, good. Is a Sydney-born, Los Angeles-based critic, writer, and producer, and accomplished critic of theater, film, art exhibitions, music, and books. Pauline is a writer, video segment producer, and presenter for her own arts web magazine, ArtSpeed LA. She also reviews theater for Stage Rod and LA Weekly, and is a member of the Los Angeles Drama Critics Circle. Pauline has worked as a freelance critic and arts reporter for the past 23 years, covering new releases at film festivals such as Cannes, Venice, Berlin, Toronto, and Sundance. She also files celebrity interview feature articles for Film Inc., Australia, and Ventura Boulevard magazine. Pauline holds a master's degree in theater and film studies from the University of New South Wales, Australia. She is also a published author of kids literature and a cookbook, and edited the fascinating memoir. We'll be the judge of that. Edited the fascinating memoir, Here I Am. In between obtaining her university degree, she writes bios. No, just kidding. In between obtaining her university degrees, Pauline carved out a 9-year career working backstage at the Sydney Opera House and various theaters throughout Australia, Tokyo, and London. There we go.
Wow.
All right. I'm just let's see. Anthony Burns doesn't exist. Bill Radin didn't send me a bio, but I'm going to tell you his story anyway. He's a rodeo clown from Memphis. Was one of the first Mouseketeers. No. You didn't send me. All right, here you go. Bill Radin is a theater critic and entertainment journalist in Los Angeles. He's a member of the Los Angeles-based Gunfighter Nation Playwrights Group. Has written and still writes for LA Weekly, Stage Raw, Huffington Post, and various other outlets. I'm sure. All right, Jason Rohr in the middle here. Where are you, Jason? Jason Rohr is a stagehand who builds sets and sees a lot of theater. He has written, produced, acted in, or directed over 100 stage entertainments. He writes about theater for stage and cinema and Bitter Lemons. What a smart guy. Francis Baum Nicholson, right here. Francis studied history and theater at the University of the Pacific and holds an MFA in writing from Spalding University in Louisville, Kentucky. Sorry. When not in the theater, Francis teaches government economics and philosophy at Pasadena's Blair High School under the name F.M. Nicholson. Under the name F.M. Nicholson, she is the author of 2 published collections of poetry, and her poems have appeared in several literary journals. She lives in Pasadena with her wife, fellow poet Cynthia Rausch Aller, and a rescue tabby named Hermione. Her grand productions of the summer will be the weddings of both her children 2 months apart. And we're not going to mention Anthony because he's not here. Oh, we got Stephen here. All right, sorry. Stephen Lee Morse is a playwright, a theater writer, and editor of the community-funded visual arts venture Stage Raw, www.stageraw.com. Morris chaired the jury for the Pulitzer Prize for Drama in 2002 and served on 2012 and served on that jury in 2011. He received the Critic of the Year prize for his print reviews by the National Entertainment Journalism Awards in 2011. His play, let me see if I say it right, Muscat, adapted from Mikhail Bulgakov's novel The Master and Margarita, was produced by City Garage Theater in Santa Monica's Bergamot Station last year. His play Beechwood Drive was presented off-Broadway and was subsequently published by both Samuel French and Smith and Krauss in its Best New American Playwrights of 2009 anthology. His farce about the press, Red Ink, has been in development at the New York Theater Workshop, Pacific Resident Theater Los Angeles, and Bootleg Theater Los Angeles. Morris has been the lead theater critic at the LA Weekly for 15 years. His theater features have also been published in the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, American Theater Magazine, Backstage, World's Fair Magazine in San Francisco, and Drama Magazine in London. From 2006 to 2011, Morris served on the faculty of the NEA Annenberg School of Journalism Institute for Criticism in Theater and Musical Theater. He has been an adjunct professor of theater at the University of Southern California and currently serves as adjunct professor of theater for California State University, San Bernardino and Dominguez Hills. This is our panel. Thank you so much for being here. It's a great I'm Colin Mitchell. I'm the editor-in-chief of Bitter Lemons.
Ooh.
Yeah, no, I hate revealing that. Because, and I'm going to reveal something else here. I'm going to give you my cell phone number, because if you want to text me some questions as we're talking here, you're welcome to do that. I'm going to throw that down, immediately destroy it after this is done. Yeah, that'll never happen. My number is... All right, very good. So, let's get down to this. So the main topic this year is the crisis in coverage, which we all seem to understand well, especially you guys who've been writing 30 years in theater criticism. But first I want to get down to the main question, I think, in these changing times, and I'll go down the line and ask you guys. I'll ask Pauline first. My main question is serious theater criticism still relevant?
Absolutely.
And to whom and why?
Absolutely. Serious theatre criticism is relevant, of course. To whom? To the community, and also to people who want to work out what play they want to see. What was the rest of the question?
Why is it still relevant?
Why is it still relevant? Well, she's that's a curly one. I honestly think my purpose as a critic is to guide the audience, guide readers, guide people out there who want to plunk down their hard-earned cash. Which play should they see? And there's an awful lot of theatre in LA. There's, you get to pick and choose. So as a critic, I like to say, here's why you should see this. This one's worth your time and your money. This one isn't. That's my job, and I believe that that's a valid vocation.
So for you, it's mostly about letting the audience know what you think they should see and what they should not see.
Yeah.
Okay. Bill?
You're going to have to repeat the question.
I will. It's very hard. Is serious theater criticism still relevant, and if so, to whom and why?
Is it still relevant? That's a good question. I was telling you, I had this, back in the 1980s, there was sort of an anecdotal bit of wisdom that at that time the serious criticism was the LA Weekly and the LA Times, and it was usually told to show the reach of both theater departments, and it was sort of like a rave. Los Angeles Times review would fill a small theater for 6 months, an LA Weekly review for like a month, maybe. I mean, you would hear different versions of that. And
Was there data supporting that?
it was completely anecdotal, but it was something that you heard a lot. I don't know, Stephen, what?
No, I echo what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's not true.
And so much more recently, as I was telling you, Colin, I spoke to Chris Fields. I did this thing for the LA Weekly about the financials of small theater, and what I found very shocking was that he said that the importance of a good theater review wasn't all that important anymore. That when reviews came out, there would be this slight bump for that week. But that the difference between a financial hit and something that lost money was something he called word of mouth, which or buzz. That wasn't, and my impression was that the role of serious criticism, at least in determining the financial success of a show, was much less today than it was before. Something I found very depressing. Is it still relevant? Yes, but I think its relevance has changed, certainly.
How
since
so?
the 1980s.
Do you think it's changed to whom it's relevant?
Because now I think even though newspaper criticism, which is what we're talking about, was initially to guide audiences to see shows that were around, I think now its relevance has shifted between the here and the now. Well, now it's just a cog in this buzz machine that is social media, the entire spectrum of it. But I think now its relevance has shifted to posterity, because it is the serious critics, the people like Stephen and well, Jason.
All you guys are.
Yeah, but you're laying down something for theater historians. It's something that isn't as efficacious now. I've got nothing to support this.
I was actually going to add that point, is that the other main reason criticism is important is that it documents an ephemeral art form.
Right.
So people can look back 30 years ago and find that review of that play with that original cast, and it's a document.
Right. Yeah. So it's the people that it's relevant to has shifted. You think though?
I think now it's part of this much larger machine, that the word of mouth machine, the buzz machine, the thing that gets people into theaters. Yeah.
So do you think that has diluted? I mean, has it diluted the weight of a serious?
Well, if your definition of the point of a serious review is to put asses into seats, then perhaps yes, that represents a dilution. But if you define serious criticism as thoughtful, persuasive writing about the theater, then no, it hasn't, because that's going to live on in the record.
Okay, Jason, what do you think?
There are people on this panel who have been doing this literally 10 times as long as I have, so I don't have a lot of arrogance about my own position in this, but the record that's being contributed to by somebody like Ms. Nicholson is important, I think not as much to the audience, not as much to the potential revenue stream, but it's a curating of the culture. The job of a critic is, as I see it, because I don't get paid, I'm also the only person up here who doesn't get paid to critique. I'm the only one who started in the era of the new media, and I haven't made a fucking dime. I've spent a lot of money doing this. The gas is expensive in Los Angeles, and I'm poor. And the only way I can see theater is to go and review it. And that's how I sing for my supper. And what I've noticed is that nobody cares if I write a funny review. Nobody cares if I write a particularly nasty review. And I hope I've gotten those mostly out of my system in the first couple of formative years. But what people seem to care about and what resonates is whether I'm addressing this thing in its context and what's mostly going on in the theater. There are movements, right? And within these movements, what's going on? What's actually happening? What's being told about us? And the nature of a critique that I write, I hope, is that it tells the production team what they're doing right and what they're doing that could have struck me better. And they can take my word for it or not, obviously. But what I'm doing is not trying to sell seats, and it's become an interesting, I think one of the biggest changes that I've noticed in the last few years is the relationship between the PR machines of larger theaters and the critics. I was told by a critic, very well-respected critic around town, he's been a critic for 35 years, I was told in the lobby of the Geffen the other night that he does well as long as he remembers that he works for the theaters. I cannot agree. I think that this is, I'm working for the theater, certainly, but that doesn't mean I'm telling them what they want to hear. The news is nobody's going to the fucking theater. That's the news, right? And I think that boosterism is not helping. And so I think that's changed a lot. I think the blog era has given rise to a lot of positive reviews from people who want to justify the expense that they've gone to see a show. And I think that that's doing nobody any favors. I think the plethora of bad theater that's always been out there, there's a plethora, most cheeseburgers suck, right? It's hard to make a good thing, it really is. And theater is a much more complicated animal than most cheeseburgers, so I have great respect and affection for the people who make theater. Most of it's going to be bad. And those people who have put in that effort deserve the reaction of an analysis and a considered critique. So that hasn't changed. What's changed is the number of people who are being paid to do that, which is just about nobody. You're looking at it, pretty much. You know, there's about twice as many as the people up here on this stage who actually get paid on a regular basis to do this in Los Angeles. And that's a crisis.
So do you think the relevancy of what you're doing in writing is more for the people making the theater rather than, say, the audience or the
Very few of the people I critique would agree with that, but yeah, I think that's certainly the audience for whom I'm writing. I've attempted, there are PR machines in town that have attempted to fold critics into their sphere of influence, and I don't think that's right. I think it's silly. I think it demeans the whole thing. If that's what you want, write your own press release, publish that. That's, you know, that's a thing. I'm not here to do that. Certainly not if you're not paying me. I'll shill for anybody who will pay me. Nobody's made such an offer.
It goes back to, I think I wrote something a couple years ago about whether the theater critics should be or can be friends with artists.
Well, Stephen's a great example of this. I mean, you're an active artist in the community, right? And yet, you're still a critic. I don't think there's an inherent conflict of interest there. I think Walter Carr, I mean, there's a history of critics who were active in their medium.
Yeah. Right. Francis, what do you think?
Okay, the relevance has definitely shifted. I've been writing for over 30 years for theater, and when I first started, I'd get stopped on the street by people, because most of the papers I write for are suburban papers, community papers, and I'd be stopped on the street by somebody who said, I just read your review, now I want to go see the show. I mean, this is fairly common. As a matter of fact, I've still to get told occasionally about the theaters very much in our local sphere. I always love the people who go to previews and then sit behind me somewhere, you know, in some other context, and lean over and go, I want you to explain it to me now. You know, that kind of thing. And I mean, what it is, and my favorite one actually was a review I gave to a play I just absolutely loved. But, you know, it was, many of the people who were reading the paper, even when I got started, were retired, let's put it nicely. And I was stopped by an old man who was actually a friend of my grandmother's on the street in Pasadena, in his cane, wagging his finger, saying, I always thought you were a good girl. So, I mean, this is
Then you became a critic.
yes. Oh, and you like things like sex. So, I mean, you know, it depends. I mean, that particular group, I was very difficult to write for when I was trying to think of them mostly, in that I always had to temper what I loved in the theater with what they would kill me for liking. You know, it wasn't so much that I was going to I had to try to explain why they ought to like this, whether they did or not. And I do remember going to, I was still in my 20s, I think. I went to see the original Los Angeles production of Sweeney Todd. And I remember turning to my companion at the time and saying, thank God that my editor is writing this one, because how do you say this is a really fabulous piece of theater, and all of you are going to kill me if you come and see it. So, you know, it's one of the, you know, because you'll all hate it and be very angry. So there's always that tempering factor with me, and what I've really liked about getting, aiming heavily for the stuff that I'm now doing online is that my editor can love it or not, and she can put it in or not, and I'm still got a place where I can go and say what I want. But
That's interesting, because I do see some of that. So you do temper and cater and shape your opinions according to your audience.
No, well,
We all do.
yeah, I think we all do, but I mean, I don't want to say that I somehow censor myself. I got over that early. What I've decided is I have to be very sure that what I say follows a pattern so that they can trust, they know me well enough after a while to know whether what I like is something they're going to like. There was a very telling moment I saw very early on in my writing career. There was a film critic that was on one of the television stations at the time. I can't even remember his name. And he made the at that time, it seemed, gross error of hating Raiders of the Lost Ark. Okay? And in an article that was in the Times shortly thereafter, they were doing some kind of bio of him, and one of the things he talked about was the fact that his family had been lost during the Holocaust. And so he could not handle anything that made Nazis funny. And so for him, it was terrible because the Nazis were not treated as, as consistently horrifying. And so what that taught me more than anything else is that if people know the context of who you are, what you like, what you don't like, as long as you can remain consistent in yourself, then they have a way to read whether that's going to mesh with what they're
They
going
can
to
trust
or not.
you.
They can trust me.
Over the long haul.
And that was made even more important when I moved from the little weekly that I'd been writing for, which eventually morphed itself into the Pasadena Weekly, but it wasn't then, to the Star News, which had much larger context in it. I replaced a woman who was that shill, who loved going to the theater. And so if she told everybody they were ready for Broadway, they'd keep inviting her to their parties and things like that. And and I was so mad. I will tell you, one of the 3 worst shows I've ever seen was a production of The Crucible that she said was ready to go to New York. It was horrible, horrible thing. And I thought, somebody's got to replace her and actually tell the truth, because otherwise, first thing, the theaters will never get better.
Yeah.
And secondly, the audience that you want to reach will never trust the paper. And so that's what I've tried to do.
Is that how you got your job?
Yeah,
Did you do a coup?
Yeah, did you
Well, actually, I went in with this enormous notebook of stuff I'd done for the weekly and said, this is what I do. She doesn't seem to be writing all the time anymore. Wouldn't you want to have me instead? It was pretty intense.
Sounds
So,
pretty ballsy. It's great.
well-
you ordered her hit on her?
yeah. She was a little old lady. She's going to
I know some
retire.
guys.
Yeah, I know. She died of her own accord, thank you.
Oh.
But
That's my mother you're talking about.
Steven, so what do you think?
The question was,
Relevance.
Is it still relevant, and if so, to whom and why?
okay, so you have to start with what does relevant mean. If relevant is defined by influence and commerce attached to that influence, if that's, in the old model, we had a series in the press of institutions that fed that relevance. And the efficacy of those institutions is clearly crumbling and has been really quickly. And that's the first point. If theater continued to be, or if theater criticism continued to be relevant by that standard, you wouldn't have seen the massive layoffs of arts critics across the globe. I just heard that the New York Post just, the Independent in London stopped covering theater reviews. This is London, remember?
Really?
Yeah. They're closing their theater sections. So there is a perception from Los Angeles to London that general readership audiences, not people creating theater, general audiences are no longer going to theater critics, and they've been losing their jobs fast. And this is not just in theater, this is across the board. I was with an unnamed editor of the LA Weekly last week, and we went over the numbers on the fringe reviews. And sorry to break the bad news, but they're pathetic. This isn't the LA Weekly. Readers, this is a general reader. Not even the community appears to be reading these reviews. So I'm just giving you the facts. It's not very pleasant. So never mind, there's hardly any theater. Nobody's going to the theater. Clearly nobody's reading. Even the people who make theater that we think we're trying to please aren't even reading those reviews. In any kind of significant numbers, the way they were, as Bill says, in the 1980s, where they go to the destination site. So if you use that as a measure of relevance, it's completely irrelevant. I don't know how you could argue anything else. But that's not the only measure of The other relevance is, are we of value? And the first people we probably speak to are the people creating theatre. And when they pay attention, if we have something worth saying, putting something in some context, or if it's argued in an articulate, if we get it in a way that maybe general audiences won't get, and we can express that, they will use the social media to broadcast that review and get it out there, and the relevance gets redefined. And it's no longer through those institutional pillars that used to be the bedrock of relevance, but now it's through the power of our own brand and our own intelligence and our own powers of persuasion to make people look at a theatre event in a different way from what is usually expected. I think that's the only way it can be relevant in these very quickly shifting times.
So would you say that, and you know, I think you've very well articulated what, you know, the theme of this event is, you know, the crisis in coverage. So would you say perhaps, because it seems like there's still a lot of very good critics and good writers who love theater and want it, and are all of these things, historians and contextualists and all of these things. So the fact that less people are reading those and less big publications are hiring people to do that job, and less people are going to the theater, do you think that perhaps the crisis is in the marketing of theater criticism?
The marketing of theater criticism?
Is there a new, I know it's an odd thing to even put together, but you know, because clearly one of the biggest things is the transition from print to online, and sort of that quagmire and sort of murky world of online. You're not quite sure what's, you know, legitimate, what's not, stuff like that. That was clearly illegitimate, but yet people keep reading.
We're waiting for the return from the fraternity suit.
So my question is, this is the next question for everybody, please jump in, is perhaps the focus now, since you're all good writers, is the marketing of yourselves.
Yeah, well, you end up doing more of that. I mean, whether it's in publishing or it's in theater criticism, a lot of what you're supposed to do is market yourself these days to some extent. But I think that I'm really interested in that you're saying that critic is saying that as long as they ring good with the theater. I mean, that's just ridiculous. I mean, first off, that I keep thinking about the fact that I was lucky in that I already had a name in some way, in some circles that would work, so that when I went online, I was doing so, and it didn't get mentioned, but it's Stage Struck Review is my online one, and
Which is excellent.
oh, thank you. Inconsistent in that I don't publish every day. My son, the computer geek, is always saying, "Mom, you're being there every day," and I'm just not. But there you go. The thing is that having, I mean, once you've got a brand, it's trying to stay true to it, but it's getting the brand in the first place is kind of difficult. And these days, without newspapers to do it, that's hard, because once I had a relationship with the community, it was a lot easier to then build a relationship online. And so I really respect people who started online, because you do have to do so from this sort of anonymous, eager beginning. I mean, they just don't, somehow there seems to be a more concrete relationship with newspapers, but that's disappearing.
I don't have to remember the times when there was a big readership, though. So
Yeah.
I don't have that handicap, you know.
That's all right. Yeah, actually, there are things not to mourn about that. I had an entire, I had an entire letters to the editor, entirely devoted to people who didn't like a review of mine. So it was like, it was just, screaming at me about not liking deserts. Now, if you've ever seen Desert Song, which nobody does anymore for reasons, it's an operetta that begins with a bunch of Muslim Arabs remembering that Muslims don't drink in a drinking song, and its sensitivity starts from there. So
That sounds hilarious.
oh, it's hysterical. There actually are two people who are supposed to be the comic relief, and they're completely superfluous. It's because everything is funny, but which really annoyed people who were 80 and went there on their first date to see Desert Song. Anyway. But it's, there's, it's true, you don't have to think about that. And actually, the relevance has changed, as somebody said, to a great deal of talking to theaters about what they're doing right and wrong. And I've forgotten the original question.
No, it's okay. I mean,
Anybody else about just the marketing of the?
What's the question?
The marketing.
Well, the question is, do you think perhaps in these changing times and due to what Stephen says, that no one's reading or no one's going to theater, even though people are still writing excellent theater criticism, perhaps the emphasis should be on the marketing of theater criticism?
Well, yeah, I think this was already answered. But yes, we have to market ourselves. We have to promote our reviews, get them out there, and we've got social media now. We've got all sorts of avenues to do that. Just to slightly change that question though, and I wanted to bring in the fact that social media has actually diluted the value of the critic. So now everybody can write a Yelp review, everybody can write some little blog review, and readers look to their peers. They're not necessarily looking to the critic with some degree or some, background or some sort of authority. They just want to hear what people are saying about it.
Well, then why should we be reading it?
Because we do have authority, we can put that play in context, we can bring in some background, we can bring in our education, we can educate the reader. It's more than a good critical review. It's so much more than just, oh, I really like this play because so-and-so was such a good actor. And that's what most Yelp style, blog, personal, social media reviews are. And they can be as short as a tweet, right?
Right, sure.
Yeah, and they don't put in any analysis usually.
Exactly.
Or they have that annoying feeling that because I'm a critic, I must be critical. And so everything has to be about how awful something was. And, what was the, Birnbaum, was that his name? What was the music critic? He was here in Los Angeles for a long time. Who, I knew people involved with the LA Opera, and I knew people involved with the Master Chorale and the Philharmonic who would say, oh my gosh, he almost liked us. It was so exciting. And you think, when they do something really spectacular, it was exciting because he didn't talk them down too much. And that can turn people off too. My newspaper has just gone to putting stars on all my reviews, which is just like, please, I am not Yelp, but they decided they have to put stars because everybody wants stars. And it's
a shorthand.
Yeah, it is, but it's annoying because it's such oversimplification.
Yeah.
No, it's really hard to tell. I'm always surprised that sometimes I think, well, I'll review the show at Geffen, and they have a big marketing department, they have a big following, and it turns out nobody reads that review. And then I do a theater on Santa Monica Boulevard and it goes off the radar. I mean, it's really unpredictable.
Meaning it gets shared.
It gets a huge readership.
Well, that's one of the things I was attempting to guide you guys towards is that you're all excellent writers, and that's important, but perhaps the way that people are getting or want to get their information about theater is also shifting. And so what I was trying to say is that perhaps there are new ways, with video and with other types of, keeping it still sophisticated and savvy, but is there a new way to sort of reach?
You're asking the wrong people.
I mean, speaking as the old lady, I think that one of the things that I've discovered is the power of having notifications of my reviews go out over Twitter. They get picked up and scattered all over the place, and I get acknowledgments every time the stuff is shared, and it's just stunning. I mean, it just goes everywhere, particularly with little theater companies, and that would be the thing. Not with the big established things, but with the little theater companies. There's a little itinerant company that did a show fairly close to us recently, and that thing's just gone off the rails, and the show's been extended, and they continue to send it out all over the place, and I mean, it's really being read by a lot of people.
The Courage Theater Company machine is, these are, to me, they're little kids, I'm shocked always at the excellence of their productions, but their PR machine is awesome. For about a week and a half, I was the only review of The Yellow Boat, and through the roof. I was famous briefly. It was awesome. But they're really hard workers, and they're motivated because they're itinerant. They don't have any they don't have any stasis at all.
They'll turn 40 soon.
They'll sell that futon and get a bed. But yeah, it's funny how sometimes the bigger houses don't do the marketing for you, and but with Facebook and Twitter and pin the board, whatever, there are
Let's keep the sail on the donkey.
they are. It's easier now than ever to market yourself, but it's also much harder because there's so much more competition. And as everyone has noted, you have competition now from your illiterate cousin, who's also writing, and if he's got a blog, you know, there's a picture of him, well, that's pretty legitimate, isn't it? So the difference, for me, all I can do, I don't have a machine, all I can do is try and write insightful, thoughtful, and helpful criticism. And that's, if I'm ever going to get paid for doing this, you know, it's going to be because of that. It's going to be because I had something valuable to say. Because I cannot compete with the shills. They've got that covered.
Yeah, I've been interested though that even some of the bigger houses have been, there's at least a couple of them that will kind of hound me to come see things because they want to have the input from somebody who knows what they're talking about instead of the people who just come in there to give it 3 stars, you know, 4 stars or 8 stars. And I actually got a call one time from a minor actor in a show they were doing for Taper because, you know, I recognized the artistic context for a literal pipe dream in a play about Freud. And I said, oh, it's all about Dali and everything. She goes, well, you're the only person who ever said that. Oh. You know, but it's interesting because they're all reading to see if you got the context and stuff. So I wanted to, this is just been running around my head and I'll forget it if I don't say it. I know I'm totally shifting the thing. One of the questions that was here early was, can you be, sort of, it was implied in here was, can you be friends with people in the theater? And you have to be, of course, because you're in the theater as well as looking at it. I've never found it to be a problem, and as long as they knew that I was going to be consistent, that I could love you and tell you your show sucked. I grew up with a woman who was the assistant to Gordon Davidson for many years, and she was very funny. She'd come up to me every once in a while and say, are you going to hurt us as much as everybody else? And I'd say, yes, you know. And just, you know, walk away, but it didn't destroy our friendship or anything.
Some people can't quite handle that, though.
Yeah, well.
Especially the younger artists. So, along those lines, just for me personally, because I read a lot of reviews, I've read a lot of reviews over the past 5 years because of Bitter Lemons, and Stephen and I have had this discussion before, is that for me, the branding of theater criticism is less about the publications and the outlets as it is about the individual writer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the biggest changes that is happening online. Because, you know, I write so much for Bitter Lemons, and then when people actually meet me, they're like, oh, yeah, the Bitter Lemons guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I like merge those two things without, you know, just kind of happened over a period of years. But, you know, for me, it's like I want to read Stephen Morris or Bill Radin or Francis or Pauline. I want to read your guys' review. It doesn't even matter where it is. So is that a change? I mean, is that something that perhaps might allow theater criticism to become?
I think there used to be more celebrity critics than there are now. I get the impression anyway. John Simon, or, you know, these people who were famous for having this very specific voice that was consistent, it was readable, it was entertaining, and they all got fired, laid off.
Yeah. Well, I do think that it's interesting. I think there is a voice that's in the media, but increasingly it's in social media or it's online. It's not in the traditional newspaper setting. I've discovered that even the theaters I've covered for years used to always look at basically of the chain that I write for, because I'm the only theater critic for 3 papers now. But the one that anybody knows is the Pasadena Star News, and so they used to always have my name in the Pasadena Star News, even though I had a blog as well. Now I'm discovering that over and over again they're only quoting me as being from Stage Left Review, because that is exclusively me, and they want people to come to me, you know, as opposed to having to sort their way through the paper to find me. They can go to find me there.
I have to start from the other side of that perspective. Whenever I'm really bored and have absolutely nothing to say in print, or at least on the blog, this is what I used to do. I create a fictitious theater critic who gets all the facts wrong. And I just give him free voice, and he did this, and he reviewed a show at the Taper that
What's his name?
Oh,
Clem.
now he's Clem.
Right.
He's going to write a review of Lyndon Arden, by the way. So but he went by a different name earlier. I can't remember what it was. And I reviewed a show at the Taper that completely got the premise wrong. It got the facts wrong. And it was a show everybody excoriated, and he loved it because he just missed the point completely. And I got a call from Jason at the Taper in the marketing department, and I said, I know this is a little touchy, but can we quote him? For a pull quote in the LA Times.
Oh
I just went back and forth, holy moly, here we go. I mean, this is the talk about making a mockery of the profession.
Yeah.
Well, that crosses a line because you had those guys in New York that were faking the quotes.
Yeah, well,
That's a
they
fake
would
quote.
quote Frank Rich because they got a Frank Rich out of the phone book. And then they would treat him to dinner and champagne up and then ask, what did you think of the show?
So to quote the joke reviews.
Yeah.
See, while I find that, I agree with you, while I find that, I find that great. I find that so entertaining and so, I think it's, but as long as you
Because
let
it
people.
appeals to your love of the absurd, that's why.
Yeah, and I like theatricality, and I think that some of the stuff that the fact that we're moving to online stuff, we should just use it. Use it. I mean, as long as you're letting people know at some point.
Yeah,
I wrote an April Fool's article like 3 or 4 years ago. Jason's been out doing it the last couple of years. But it was an article about a lost Beckett play that was found in a Paris bookstore.
Oh, great.
And every single link on that thing went to a thing that said April Fool's. There was like hundreds of links in the whole thing. And it was wildly read. It was passed around. Everybody's like, did you hear about that? Even my brother was he's like, you son of a bitch, you got me. And it was just, it was hilarious. And people were like just so overjoyed. But I don't know, I found that really entertaining.
well,
and
it can
fun.
be entertaining, but if it gets taken seriously, it's like somebody writing a scholarly treatise and citing The Onion. I mean, it just doesn't,
Right.
it's one of those things where you have to be kind of careful, because if Clem becomes a real person to someone, and if they're actually trusting that review, again, with the consistency and going, because they've heard somebody say something good about it, then you've got a real problem.
Clem's just the Tony Clifton of arts priests.
Stunts can hurt you, right? That's why they're fun to watch. Stunts, people get injured in stunts. And I had a friend who was at SMU as a running back, and he was performing a stunt in a play, blew out his knee, and now he's a goddamn television actor because he can't run anymore.
Oh, cry me a river.
Yeah.
Stunts will cost you sometimes, but
I always wanted to
There's-
play football.
I don't have to be an actor.
there's a sell there, right? So we got to do something. I mean, well, part of the reason that there's been a decline in arts attendance overall is the economy. Part of the reason is the art education system, But a big part of it is that nobody wants to go see shit they can see on television. And I think a lot of theater looks like, soapbox, but a lot of theater looks like stuff that I can see on TV for free, or for the price that I'm already paying for cable, if I'm paying for cable. So one of the reasons that more theaters are reaching out and becoming avant-garde in their way is that we need to be entertained. We have a desire as a people, as a race, to be entertained, and we're largely not. So if it doesn't surprise me that critics are turning to stunts because theaters are turning to stunts.
Right, and I agree with that. I think that the serious theater critic can still be entertaining and do things in different ways that I think will draw. Because I agree with you, there's so many things to entertain us and pull our attention. Why are we going to be a well-educated, sophisticated theater critic?
Yeah.
Just go to, yeah, I agree. There was something in here. Someone sent a message, a question. Couple of questions, and they said in film, new critics do YouTube reviews. Does this happen in theater? And why or why not? Why don't? And maybe it's because you guys don't want to be on camera, and there is some anonymity that I mean, I even enjoyed anonymity in the first few years. I was writing Bitter Lemons, and as soon as people like that, I was like, yeah, it was a little weird, but you know, that's one way of doing it. Videos, I don't know if that works. No, yes, maybe.
No, it's a very effective thing. I mean, there are numbers to support that when you use media like that, it pulls in readers. Of course, that's a slightly different skill set
Right.
that might not intimidate people with acting background. But I know, I used to work for KPFK, and when fundraising would come around, I was just hopeless on open.
No.
I just turned into I'm just an incoherent, stuttering.
No, I mean, it's a lot easier to sit down at your computer and to compose your review nicely and replace words and be selective and really craft a beautiful review that you're proud to put out there. It's another thing to stand in front of a camera and just blabber on about that play you just saw, or
And then where do you get the-
and you can't read your review on camera because then it's so stilted. So it's exactly a totally different skill set.
And you need a camera, and you need a guy running the
No,
camera.
you
need
need
a
to stick it on
laptop.
the thing.
Huh?
You can
But no.
Stick it on there.
stick it
No,
in.
you don't, because if it's half-assed, then it's going to defeat the
There are
entire.
lots. Chris Crocker made $7 million with a
Right.
half-assed blog. You know,
And
people
that was
wanted to
what-
see it was the thing.
Yeah, the little camera on the actual computer, and these guys are just talking to that
Yeah,
camera.
the delivery systems have declined such and degraded such that people will accept almost
They will.
anything.
Well, yeah, I mean,
trees.
the sheet in the back, you know.
Right. I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I, there's a reason why I spent most of my life in, when I was actually involved with the theater, behind stage and running lights and building sets and stuff and directing because, as I say, I'm a very mediocre actress and a reasonably decent director and I do know what I'm looking at when I write about it, but to stand in front of a camera, I'd be like, and I'd have to like film it 18 times and it just,
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I remember I was talking to Bob Marini, and he was telling me once that he's like, oh, I'm tired of like being in my dark office, writing these reviews. He's like, I want to get. He's like, if you, he was talking to me. He's like, if you could create a situation where you get some of these critics together, and whether it's a live event or live streamed event, where you get some critics, who like that sort of activity, this stuff like this, and tape it and live stream it and show it to people, and still talk about shows. Like, let's say all 5 of you went to a show, right? And then we do a show where we drink wine, eat cheese, and then you guys talk about the show. And you're allowed to be as honest as you want and be,
yeah, wow, we very
I don't know if, that would be a little more interesting to me than that. I think Bob was just like, I want to interact with people, I want to get out there and interact and stuff. So you
I've
get-
actually done the on-camera stuff. I mean, it's not that hard to do. It isn't as comfortable to do. It's probably something we should all do a bit more of, I think. Yeah, just a little, little video, 2-minute take on that play. It's not that hard. But it does take a different...
Yeah, it takes a lot of, and the way that
You don't get to craft your words like that.
yeah, it is.
we're going to jump into questions right
Oh,
now.
yeah.
Well, I said that text. My question was that what I was getting at is that in film, this brand new generation of critics are starting with video.
Right.
And what's so much taking your generation and putting you on video? I'm just wondering, is this not happening with
forbid.
film?
Yeah.
I mean, where are the 18-year-old, 25-year-old theater critics, and are they not jumping in with video first? Will that
Some of
happen?
them are ready for stage raw.
Yeah.
We're starting,
Yeah, Citizen
seriously,
Raw.
we've got a Citizen Raw, it's called, we've got a program with Occidental College, and we've now recruited 4 theater critics.
Oh, great.
Just out of college, and sitting around, they're kind of amazed, it just didn't occur to them. That they didn't know what theater was, and they're rolling around on Santa Monica Boulevard, they had no idea this activity was taking place, and they really kind of think it's cool. And also, some of it is not just populated by people of my generation, but it's actually there. They just didn't know. We had one gal from Cal State San Bernardino been up and down Lancashire. So many, she drives in all the time. She had no idea there was even anything, let alone a theater community. I didn't know about it. She didn't know there was a
At least half a
theater.
dozen.
Speaking of marketing problems.
Yeah.
They should know that. Governors, they know about the Starbucks, and they know, where all the food and the clubs are, but they don't know where the theaters are. So that they're not averse to it at all.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, it's another financial problem. The smaller the theater, the lighter the publicity budget. And it used to be that what they would do is they'd invite theater critics in because that would mean they get free publicity in the newspaper. And now that that's not as legitimate, I mean, certainly my paper went from having a weekend entertainment magazine and an entertainment page every day of the week to having one entertainment page on Saturday. That's it.
Since Tony, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, so that publicity is there, and the theaters don't have the ability, the money to publicize themselves, or they got used to the fact they could get this private thing, or this easy thing by acting in critics, and then Pete goes, that isn't really getting where they need to go. I think there's just a general need to retool how we market. I don't know how you do that.
Well, since Tony Frankel took over stage and cinema, there's been about a fourfold increase. It's just been a couple of years. There's been a fourfold increase in our readership, and it's because of the curation of the content. And the website still looks like some blog. It's not fancy, it's not anything, but people are inviting us now to everywhere, and we're just this little website. It's about, and apparently they still have this polite fiction in mind that we're somehow going to sell their tickets, that we're somehow going to legitimize their operation, right? That we're going to bring something that they can't do on their own.
Well, one second. One of the things I have noticed, and someone touched on this, is that, and people talk to me about this all the time, is they're just hungry for serious theater criticism, because there is so much of the, the Yelp and the blogs and the just personal stuff like that. But they're just like, where do we go? Where do we go to like actually find someone who's like smart, sophisticated, savvy, and can bring in all these other things to it? And so
as advertising as the video component is, and it's great for capsule summation. If you're talking about serious criticism, that's probably not the best format because of the format.
And something Stephen just said gave me a brilliant idea. You say people go up and down Lancashire and they know where the Starbucks is. Why do they know where the Starbucks is? There's a big ass Starbucks logo. There's the green whatever. Everybody knows where the Starbucks are. What if we branded all our theatres in town with that fantastic hashtag that's singing
with
the
Starbucks?
Sydney LA Theatre, hashtag LA Theatre. What if every theatre in LA had a little sign or a neon light that said LA Theatre, and then you knew, looking down the street, there's 3 theatres down
It's
there.
not even expensive.
No, it's a good idea. I mean, one of the things, this theatrical producers league that came into formation
Right.
a year ago, hopefully they'll get this together in the next 3 years. But one of their missions, they say, is to brand Los Angeles theater and sell it
Okay.
to people. You
But
know?
with a
So
sign that's consistent.
that would be interesting, though, to see the
every
hashtag LA theater,
Wouldn't that be
just like
cool?
up everywhere.
That would be really
Yes,
great.
I want one more ubiquitous sign around us. I think we've got-
At least it's for a good thing, you know?
But that's something that would catch your attention. I would look at that and go, what the hell is
Well,
it?
you've still got to brand the sign. Just having the sign around is not going to do it. You still got to sell the brand, right?
Well, the brand is
The brand
already
is already out
created
there.
its own thing online.
Oh yeah, I know at least 150 people who know what
No,
that
that's
means.
not
there's
true at
all
all.
that.
Well,
It's not true at all.
here's-
There is the hashtag LA Theater has done more in a subtle way to unite.
I don't think it's
the
subtle
LA
at all.
theater
I think
community.
it's very overt.
Well, it is now.
I think that the Producers Alliance you're talking about, I think the LA Theater hashtag has a very specific brand. It's whiny bitch. I think is that brand.
Is
Yeah, one national magazine had one article, which was essentially a press release that was critical of LA theater. And the powers that be, to the extent that we have a community, our community rallied behind the idea that, no we're not, because in Los
Oh, you're
Angeles,
talking about the Vanity Fair debacle,
Yeah.
right?
keep up. Yeah, as we know, there
Well,
was
you
one.
didn't tell the audience what you were talking about, that's all.
Yeah, it's not really relevant. I'll let them know. Thank you.
The Vanity Fair.
The
right?
Vanity Fair article suggested that there's one community in Los Angeles that produces theater, and it's people who are completely incapable of self-confidence. Because one article in a national magazine led to an uproar that, it certainly sold some Bitter Lemons copies. It certainly did.
Yeah, we made lots of money on that one.
It did.
Yeah, we're just rolling in it.
As I recall, your shares online went up about 5-fold that
Exactly.
week.
So
And
now it's worth 5 cents.
so what we are, if we brand ourselves, that's one of the things about branding. You got to be real careful what you brand yourself.
Well, let me slightly adjust that as far as the branding. What hashtag LA Theater done has it's a way to unite the communication between all of these, just spread out theaters and people all over the place. Because the biggest problem with LA Theater is the logistics of it. We're so spread out. We don't have a hub. We don't have a central location.
I wouldn't say that's the biggest problem with
Well,
Los Angeles.
it's one of the biggest problems. Logistics is one of the biggest problems with any cohesive community in this town. And the hashtag LA Theater, because everything has moved to social media and online, there's a way where you kind of feel like you're hearing from all of these different places, and it's all happening online. Clearly, but I think that's a good thing. Now, maybe is that a brand? I don't know.
It is now.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's okay.
Well, LA Theatre is in of itself, LA Theatre. It's just a word. You're the one that's imposing whiny bitch definition on it. So how can a brand be, it's what you make of the
Can
brand.
someone start the
So what have you
hashtag
made
Wendy
of the brand,
bitch?
Pauline? I didn't know.
I'll jump right on that.
Arts Beat LA was made of LA Theater.
I don't know what the answer to that question would be.
No, I didn't think you would.
All right, back on track.
Hey, to answer on your logo in front of the theater, it's not a bad idea. Starbucks, I think, gets their business because they have pretty decent coffee inside. It's not that logo. And I think if you go that extra step, though, and you start putting a grade on theaters, now we're talking. Because it's going to keep the common man away from bullshit, and that's the whole problem out here, is the shitty theater. So
That's what we do. We send you guys in as like inspectors.
Why isn't this guy on the panel?
We send you guys in as inspectors, and then you give the theaters actual grades.
Oh, that's great. Hang an A, B, C, or D, or F.
No, and it's like a restaurant. You never eat any place less than a B. Nobody does.
As
So
long as I have to wear a paper hat.
And if it's a C, you shut the place down.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying, put a sign on that signifies this is a theatre, this is a coffee shop. It doesn't necessarily, you, the audience, have to work out whether you want to drink that coffee or if you like it.
And Pauline will explain to you whether it's a theater or a coffee shop.
but you guys have the power to tell him to drink that coffee.
I promise some leg wrestling between Pauline and Jason is about to happen.
The winner is sitting in the room.
I'll thumb wrestle.
I mean, there is a difference between Starbucks and LA Theater.
Let me just write that down.
That's the pull quote.
And that is, that people understand why they're going into Starbucks. I mean, that there is a need and a use for coffee in their lives. And I think that's yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a sort of culture that goes with it. And that's what's sort of lacking, I think.
When you go to theater, you're going for a reason, right?
Well,
I mean, other than, your obligations,
I'm going for spiritual renewal.
right? Now that's the thing that I'm missing when I go to a lot of theater, and it's not just LA. I've been down on LA theater. Theater sucks. Most things suck. I'm not an optimist. One of the problems, though, with going to a spiritual place, I don't go to church. I don't have a lot of faith in sky gods or what have you. So I go to places where I can find communion. And what I find a lot of the time is a fair amount of the time, is the show talking to itself. And that I'm disallowed from communion with this thing, or maybe it's just a thing I wouldn't want communion with in the first place. Any club that would have me as a member, and so on. So the question for me is, how do we brand LA Theater as a thing which actually does you some good, as opposed to, shit, my friend's in this, I got...
Well, that goes back to something I wrote recently about the supporting and
Yes.
enjoying thing. It's funny, I wrote something, I don't know if you read it, but it was, and it came out of the Fringe, I think, unfortunately. But everybody's always like, come support LA Theater, support live theater, support my show, support my company. I was like, it sounded so, that it came from such a place of weakness and like a panhandler. Please support my drug addiction. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to enjoy your show. Tell me why I'm going to enjoy your show. Sell it to me like that. And I was talking to someone after a show, and they were like, well, what do you think? Those things are mutually exclusive? I said, no, they're not mutually exclusive, but it's a framing and it's a lexicon that makes theater and theater folk look weak and groveling and panhandling. And if you keep doing that, then people are going to look at theater as some sort of, I don't know, some sort of charity event that they
If you're have lucky, to they'll go. give you a dollar bill.
Yeah, it's like you have to, I'm obligated, I hear that all the time, obligated to see my friend's show. It's like, good Lord, man, it's just the worst place to come from.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a social cause,
Yeah.
It can have that social cause, obviously, but entertain me first, then you can preach to me and you can change my mind.
Yeah, they sell medicine by giving it names that sound like a panacea. They brand pharmaceuticals as things that will make you feel better. And theater, in theory, should do that much.
Or at least make it
Or
take.
at least make you smarter, make you better somehow. Right?
Although, I was just at one of the more entertaining shows in town.
What is it?
It's that thing at Echo.
Oh,
Backyard.
oh, yeah, I gotta see that.
I mean, it's, did you see it?
Not yet.
It's an amazing cast, one of the best casts in town, and certainly at least half the plays is worth the other half not so much. But it's undeniably a great theater experience, and two of the cast members are rather young, and I was speaking to one of them afterwards. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but it's about backyard wrestling, down along the Mexican border. And this kid who was, I don't know, I'm guessing he was around 20. He was absolutely frustrated because he was in this great show, doing this amazing work, and he just can't get a single friend of his to come and see it, because that's not what 20-year-olds do.
Because theater's so alien to them.
It just has no meaning or relevance to them.
And on that note, we'll all go outside and kill ourselves. No, but you're right. I mean,
He's got to find something better.
He's got to hang with a better crowd. Yeah.
all right, let's see.
Okay, we're gonna do some Q&A here in a sec.
I mean, who doesn't like fighting? How could you not convince your friends to come see a play about
Yeah, I
fighting?
think, it is an interesting thing, though. I think that to some extent, for some teenagers, theater means glee.
Oh,
You know, and so it's just like,
And
you
it
know,
also
and,
means Romeo and Juliet,
yeah,
which is just as off-putting to some.
yeah, until you tell them.
But also the theatrical experience demands the audience to do some work.
Yeah.
They have to listen, they have to pay attention.
Oh, that's true. They
Yeah.
have to turn their phones off.
Yeah, because movies and TV, it's just like, just pouring into your brain. You don't have to do that.
That's one of the nice things about theater, and that's where I think the communion comes in. It's as a reminder of the social contract. We all have to look in one direction. We all have to sit here and be polite to each other. We all have to try to not. We have to try to add to each other's experience as opposed to becoming an island. And I think that's something that a lot of 20-year-olds should be mandated at gunpoint to learn.
Well, and they don't have to do that as much because everything is
Yep.
automated and online.
It's right here.
They don't have you don't have to go to an encyclopedia and look it up anymore. You just go to the Lord Google and put it in, and all is well. And it's amazing for us, right? Because we don't have to do that anymore. We can just go to Google and figure it out. But when you're bred on that, you don't have to do any work. I mean, the focus and concentration necessary in the theater, besides obviously the people doing it on stage, the audience has to do it too. And some people are just like, I can't do that. One of my older brothers, I used to get him novels for his birthday. He never read any of them. He's kind of a guy who needs to go out and do things. He can't even sit in the theater. He didn't even see my shows. He's just like, I can't do it. I don't have the attention span. I just can't handle it.
I don't know if this is the case, but I'm guessing that in schools today, like when I was at school and there was a play we were studying, we went and saw that play. And, if we were lucky, it was actually being staged. Or we even went to the cinema and saw the film of the play. But nowadays, I think with the lessening of budgets in schools and so on, it's like, well, they're more likely, if they're even going to watch that play that they're studying, it'll be on video. They're not going to go to the theatre and actually experience the play in its milieu.
It is
really. I think that's the case.
Speaking as I teach. Some
Yeah, is this
totally-
true?
Well, yes and no, it depends. Again, with if it's being staged. Because I will say that so I teach in the Pasadena area, so I'm most familiar with the stuff that is there. And believe me, the budgets are low. But there are 2 theaters in town, at least, that have gone out of their way to bring students in to see productions, not necessarily what they're studying, although when I was doing Macbeth, everybody went over there to see the kids. They had a whole kids program to send people over there. But but to see live theater, to come into a live space and see live theater done by professional actors. And because, my argument all the time when I was growing up was that the reason that you have instrumental music in a school is not because you're going to create all the great musicians of the next generation, but you're going to create the audience. And I think that the same thing is true in our context now for trying, and schools, depends on the school district, but certainly in Pasadena Unified, and in Los Angeles Unified, there's a significant move to get them into larger theaters. But the thing is, the larger theaters can afford to do that. They can pay a entire company to run a show at 11 o'clock in the morning and bring kids in to do it. You're not going to see it in these small theaters. So I think that part of it may be the contextual thing of if you're all taken by your teacher to go sit in there and watch in a big theater, that's what theater is these great massive places, Pasadena Playhouse, the Tabor, the Ahmans, and the...
That's what they get exposure to?
Right, yeah, they're not going to go here because, you've got to get the actors.
Yeah, and ultimately, I mean,
It's a hard sell.
ultimately, if you bring someone to, first time in the theater and it's an excruciating experience, they're probably not going to come back.
Well,
And there was a lot of that, I think that has slightly shifted since I've been here in Los Angeles, because I think there was over 1,000 shows. Now there's 700 or 800 or something like that, which is good. But I would see shows, and if I just didn't love theater myself for various reasons, I would never come back after seeing that show.
oh, yeah, I've got some stories. Yeah.
You bring up a particular problem with theater as entertainment, because people will go to a movie and the movie could be so bad that they walk out. They'll go to a movie the next weekend.
Right.
People go to theater and have a bad experience for whatever reason.
People have seen thousands of decent movies, though, and theater is less accessible, I think, is the central problem there, is that people have less of a touchstone when it comes to theater.
No, I
No?
think it's more than that.
Well, of course, it's more
You can
than-
also, you
that's
can
part of it.
zone out on a movie. When you're in a theater and it's awful, you are really in jail. You
Oh,
can't,
yeah.
there's no escape.
Yeah.
There's not a window in this place you
Yeah.
can leap out.
No.
I mean, there is nothing more torturous than a really bad.
They did a study in a Seattle paper a few years ago and asked people, if you go to the theater and it's unpleasant, how long will it be till you're likely to go to the theater again? And people said on average 7 years.
Well, along those lines, there was a question here you can respond to, or
I wish I had that option sometimes.
you can respond to and expand on
It's
what
the
we're
same
talking
as
about.
breaking a mirror.
Here's the question: does the panel believe that the less talented theater companies should still be able to produce shitty show after shitty show, or would they rather see those companies shut down and go away?
Shut down.
Yeah.
Part of my job is to discourage bad work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there have been times when I've seen things that are atrocious, just atrocious. And sometimes in places that are celebrating their newly remodeled theater and they're doing this great stuff, and you're thinking, who's doing this? Who? Why would anybody come in here to see anything?
And who gave you all that money to
Yes,
refurbish
but
this
it's
place
like
that could have
God.
gone to a small theater that actually deserves it?
But is it okay for a theater critic to go, or maybe let's say they've seen 3 shows at this thing, at least there's a pattern of behavior, and they say, I've seen 3 shows at this company, I have hated all of them, I don't think anyone should ever patronize this.
Okay, can I spin around
Yeah.
to see what the actual role, back to relevance of theater criticism? I think the role of the critic, if we're going to remain relevant, is to go to those shows that everybody has found excruciating or for whatever reason, and say, hey, but this is what they're after. And nobody else has tried this, and this is brilliant. That's historically what the critics have always done. That's what's put criticism and theater
one of many,
on
many,
that.
many
Yeah.
services
On-
that a critic
Well-
provides. And to be the minority voice is extremely valuable. A minority report is necessary to the history and to the future. But to argue that intention deserves some sort of celebration,
No, I
I think,
understand.
is to tell all these people that are working so hard at Santa Monica Boulevard, some of whom should stop doing it and should get trades. Absolutely, there's no question.
I
And
understand.
I think it does a disservice to a lot of people to say that that one nugget in your larger piece of shit is worth expanding in your cake.
Well, but I think that there's a way to find a middle ground here, where you're telling people what was awful, and unequivocally what is awful, but you're also saying why it was worth coming to find out it was awful. I mean,
Right.
there was a reason why this play was put on. I came to see if they had managed to do it. No, they didn't, but that doesn't necessarily mean there wasn't something there that might have made a good effort, but this time, absolutely not. So it's finding that middle ground.
I also
Well,
think,
do
I
you
also,
remember-
I also think artists have the right to fail. So, you know, we can go to that play and we can say, we can see what you're going for, you didn't quite make it, you know, here's why it didn't work, here's why it did work. And I think, I want to see artists trying risky stuff. I want them to try it. Sometimes they'll fail, and then
What's
sometimes
that
they'll...
backline, next time fail better?
Mhm.
Well, and that's fine. I mean, I think there's a difference between, you know, I've seen shows at some of my favorite theater companies that I thought failed.
Yeah.
But they took the risk, and it was clearly their.
And you didn't write them
Group-
off after
yeah,
one show.
yeah.
A group of very talented people. But then there's the shows that
Yeah,
are awful,
there's a big difference.
and people should not go see them.
Well, they're not a fully formed show.
Because
They're not a fully formed show.
Right. Yeah, not fully formed, or they are fully formed and they still suck. But my point is that if you in any way encourage someone to go see this show, and it's their first theater experience, they will never come back.
Yep.
Oh,
And,
yeah,
and they will not trust you.
Which is the huge crime of overpraising a bad show.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about the necessity of creating a new audience, which is the single biggest necessity in theater right now. And how do you do that? You create better shows, and you stop telling people to go see shows, that there's a reason to go see a show that's not very good, because 7 years, try a lifetime. Most people in the United States haven't ever seen a play and are never going to.
The actor who was in the original London production of Waiting for Godot, he talks about what he remembers, I remember this interview, of what the experience was of being in that play at that time. I think it was
A
1956.
groundbreaking play, right?
Groundbreaking play. And he
That
said
people
he
just didn't get.
heard the audible groans from the audience at the premiere of that.
You don't even get that anymore.
Yeah.
You get silence. You get, I thought
But
it
it
was
was
pretty
absolutely,
good. That's what you
that
get
thing
now.
was ravaged the first week, and then it took.
Well, and as you said, when you were talking about when you were
Everyone said it was awful.
when you were
awful. It's
when
going
you
to
were
send people away from the
when
theater.
you were moving the shop to stage draw, you wrote an excellent piece about, you know, your job is to, this is valuable. This thing is valuable to me, and it may not necessarily be popular, but I want to try and make this thing I deem valuable popular.
Yeah.
And
Now, we may be talking about completely different things. I mean, we're assuming there's a presumption of what's universally bad is bad. Now,
Right.
when it premiered, there was a consensus that Waiting for Godot was bad. That there has been no play that's influenced world theater in the past 50 years more than that play. But it was greeted as being awful. And I just think we shouldn't forget that before we tell theaters to stop doing what they're doing. I think we need to keep.
well,
that
I mean,
in front.
if your personal experience with that show is a good one, and everybody else's is awful, you have to be true to them. So
Well,
I like it.
But there also is the fact that what we may be looking at are two different things. By and large, although there have been times when everything was terrible, really amazing one. But in many cases, what you have is a good concept badly realized, or you have a horrible concept they're trying to do what they can with, and you can still say, oh my God, that's a terrible production, or oh my God, that's a terrible concept. You don't want to sugarcoat that so people think, ooh, that might be interesting. But you do want to acknowledge that the attempt to do it was right, or that the thing that's wrong with it is the actors and the direction and stuff, not the play itself. And pulling it apart like that becomes really important at that point, because then if you've got a play that actually had stuff but doesn't in this production, then you don't totally discourage someone from going to see it when it does.
No, you choose your battles.
Or if you've got a really fine production company that put on a stinker just because who was the dramaturg who decided this was a great thing that they ought to bring to this theater? At that point, you don't want to shut down the company because they had poor taste in plays. So yeah, it's you have to sort of try and balance it out.
But there's an example that comes to mind with stage and cinema when Harvey Purr was still writing for us. Purr?
Harvey P.
Like a grrr.
When Harvey Purr
Grrr.
saw his third play that had been directed by Elena DeSantos, who's a friend of mine, I have to say, if I'm telling this story, He said, that's it, 3 strikes, you're out. He was done with her as a director.
But he was a famous curmudgeon, right? I mean, really?
Who is
He
it?
didn't like her work as a director, and it was certainly within his purview to say so. And after seeing 3 productions helmed by the same director, I think that's a reasonable amount of experience with that director to say, I don't want to see any more work by this director. That's pretty discouraging, right? That's information for that director. Elena DeSantos is a human being, you know. Artists aren't made out of paper, and if they are made out of paper, they should burn. There is no good reason for criticism to stop you or stop your creative voice, right? If somebody says, you're doing a thing which I find really offensive, either take fuel from that or stop doing what you're doing or something. I mean, all this information is good. It all informs the artist.
Yeah, well, someone wrote in, you know, is the critic a nurturer or an executioner, or sometimes both? Or is
Depends
it
on the
a
play.
mixture?
Yeah.
And should you be an executioner? It's like, you know, off of the
We
head.
don't have
Yes.
the power to close a theater. The LA Times, the New York Times doesn't have the power to close a
Yeah,
theater.
you can close a production though.
Yeah,
I've done
at
it.
times
Yeah.
for those production.
But what you
Jutopia went to New York, and the lead critic of the New York Times slammed it. It was a gangbang of hostile press. It came from LA. They just it played for months.
Yeah.
Made no
Yeah.
difference.
yeah
That was 5 or 7 years ago.
yeah
Look at
things that,
Are you
Spider-Man.
saying a jury show did well in New York? Really?
things have changed.
Are we surprised?
The idea that I'm there primarily as a nurturer. I want this show I see to be the best fucking show it could possibly be. I want it to erase my memory of the last 15 bad shows I saw last month. I really do. I want every show to work. And I write to the purpose of saying, Lost Moon Radio is one of the best theater companies in town, one of the most talented, capable group of artists, and writers, and composers, singers, musicians. And their new show, I thought, was a dog. It lies there. And I said so. And this piece of criticism means something specifically because I've praised these guys so many times in the past and because I have such respect for them.
Sure, yeah. All right, so I'm gonna,
Was that question answered?
Yeah.
sort of, I'm gonna ask you guys one more question, and I'm gonna open up for questions here. So, what is your favorite show now playing, either at the Fringe, or since this is part of the Fringe, or just around town, or both? Hold on.
Well, I love The Wake. I thought it was really exciting and brilliantly written and brilliantly performed. And outside of the Fringe, I love Stoneface, and I think it's made a very nice transition from Sacred Fools, a very small theatre space, to a large mid-sized theatre, which is Pasadena Playhouse. Bigger stage, a lot more money to the budget, a lot more sets, and just still a wonderful, wonderful play. So those are the 2 highlights on, you know, that
Cool. All right, Bill?
Penelope, Enda Walsh, the production at Road Machine. Enda Walsh, probably one of the most important English language playwrights at this moment. And this is a wonderful, wonderful production with an awesome cast. Everyone in this room should go rush out and see it.
Today.
So
I'm
good.
going to see
What's the
it
name of that play again?
Penelope.
Thank you.
At Rogue Machine.
Yeah.
Who consistently do good work as well.
Yeah. Anything at the Fringe, Bill?
You know what? I haven't seen that much. I'm going to see The Wake tomorrow night. I actually, Ashley Steed, I got her top 6 picks, and she's apparently right on the money, man. That Ashley Steed. What a canary in a coal mine she is. But The Wake was number 1. Women, I mean, it was all there. And unfortunately, I am so hard pressed for time. But I did like that Danielle Harms
Oh,
piece.
Yeah, I heard that one.
The Harmful Charms with Danielle Harms. And that ties into the Robert Wilson thing that's going to be at UCLA in November, which is his Harmsian riff.
My friend's seeing that.
That band.
Jason?
Penelope, by all means. But Joel David's set in Stoneface, and a lot about Stoneface, French Stewart, That really should be seen. That's something. But the production of Penelope is an entirely different thing. This is high art. It's really serious stuff. And John Flynn does an excellent job with this thing. His cast could not be better. This set could not be more impressive. This is a thing. This is one of the reasons that we do theater.
Anything in the Fringe?
I haven't seen anything at the Fringe that I would recommend, though.
Okay. Critic?
I've been out of town, so I haven't seen much of the Fringe, but, you know, it has its moments. I was grading test suits. Anyway, but I would also say Stoneface. Very riveting and fascinating span. I knew a lot of the information already, and but it was still very interesting to see it in that particular light, and it's beautifully staged. The use of projection is wonderful. The use of projection is amazing.
Did you see it at Sacred Fool?
I didn't get to, and I'm kind of sorry, but I am very excited by what they've done at the Playhouse.
Steve?
I liked it was a very strong production of Other Desert Cities, international city theater. I found it much more absorbing than it was at the tape a couple years ago, and I think not only because of the excellent performances, the space itself, it's constructed very much like a tape. It's a much more intimate space. And I got the feeling there's something about the tape, it's supposed to be intimate, but there's something really icy about it. And when I saw that same play in a really a larger thrust stage that didn't have that iciness, it really was absorbing. Just after about 20 minutes, I just couldn't let that go. In the Fringe, I sort of enjoyed Abby Schachner's one-woman show, Schachner versus Schachner. She was dropping lines, she was picking up cues with the stuff. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. The story was so good. She's looking as an infant. Her parents divorced, but they more than divorced. Her father was accused of hiring an assassin to kill her mother, and there were newspaper accounts of this because he was a East Coast physician at the time, and she's trying to wrestle to go. Wait a minute, did this really happen? Was he set up? And it's sort of like Virginia, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf revisited in a one-woman show. When marriage is such hell, the hatred between spouses runs that deep. It's just, I was watching this vicarious story, which she takes it from an infant's point of view.
All right, so questions? Christian?
Really quick question. I just want to say thank you for coming out and doing this. It was really wonderful to hear you guys talk. There's a great quote that I have on a board, and I've had it up there for probably 15 years, and I'm going to paraphrase it. It's we're the theater a tightrope where no incompetent would dare to tread. And I do feel it's the critic's job. I think what's happened over the past, I don't know, I'm 37, maybe over the past, I don't know, since probably before I was born, the theater has now become this safe, like this stage floor, you can't fall off it. And acting is the only choice I've seen people drop everything for and go get headshots. I'm just going to become an actor. And that's what's happening on these stages out here. It's those people are getting on stage in front of these people, and they suck. And until critics make it scary for those people to ever step on stage, we're never going to solve the problem.
That's one of the joys of a company like Impro, which makes up stories, full-length 2-act plays in various genres. This is a thing that dilettantes cannot do. This is a thing you cannot show up and pretend to be a fucking actor and pretend to be an artist and show up and do this superhuman feat. This requires, the people who have been doing it for 25, 30 years are real good. The guys who have been doing it for 15 years, so this is serious, serious work. This is a lifetime of dedication. And I think that theater will revive. I think that people's interest in theater will revive when more of it is impossible to do at home. So I think that's an excellent point.
I like your point. We all see a lot of things. We see the big shows, CTGs, at the table, what have you, and then we see all the little shows around town and these tiny little theaters. And there's one thing I find unforgivable, and that is bad acting. And I will call it out every time. If the acting is atrocious, then you shouldn't be on the stage.
I'll tell you what I want to do, and I'm really, it means a lot. I told Colin I'd like to form a vigilante crew that would go out, and sit in the audience, and when you're confronted with that bullshit, you would stop, you would just say something.
Or leave. You would walk or move. Nico, what?
I'm a big fan of bringing back tomatoes. I'm serious. If you ever got on stage and were embarrassed, you would never get up there again.
I was at a play recently in which an excellent actor playing Moliere, was standing on stage, and he said, somebody asked him, "How do you do?" This place sucked. One of the characters asked Moliere, "Well, how do you do your creative? Do you do focus groups? How do you know what the audience is going to respond to in your plays?" And he says, very cheeky in a terrible play to say in front of an audience, "Well, when it works, they laugh and applaud, and when it doesn't work, they throw things." And but there were 4 people in the house. The cast outnumbered us by 3 to 1. No
So
fucking way
perhaps-
am
So
I
they
gonna
could
do
have said
that.
it
It's not me.
There were actually 2 people.
So we're gonna create a new
Jason was
business.
one and I was
We're
the
gonna create a new
other.
business. From the farmer's market, all the rotten fruit stuff gets delivered to the theaters. It's there when you come in, you just put it in a little bag.
It's green.
And
It's
if
a
things
green
get
idea.
ugly, you're gonna be dodging fruit.
I was
An
gonna lob
absolute-
lemons at you
Lemons.
at the curtain call of Linden Out, and I was talked out of it.
That's because you were drunk.
And I forgot.
I'm confident all the theater makers will say, okay, we'll do that as soon as you guys stop using critics who are pretending to be critics. And it should be as dangerous for critics to be a critic
Sure.
as it is for an actor to be an actor.
Yes.
Then we'll have a resurgence.
And I think, yeah, I don't know, I do believe that watching a bad performance, if you're polite to a truly awful performance, you're doing them a disservice. I've had some really interesting hate mail over the years. I had a woman who said that if she ever committed suicide, it would be my fault. Yes,
Wow.
yes.
That's how it works.
Yeah, you know, and I think that sort, but you still can't, what it is to be the only thing that you can be shot at your newspaper. I mean, if you're the only one, then, but it's absolutely essential. I think, okay, I had bounced back and forth because of the nature of what I've done over the years. I see a lot of professional stuff, but I also see a lot of, yes, community theater too, some of which is done by people who are really good but never got into the profession. And I am a little bit kinder with amateurs, but not a lot, because I think that that's another thing. There are the people who will go to community theater and won't go to anything else because it's cheap and it's close and it's, you know, and my Aunt Susie was in a production there once. But if it's terrible, they're just as likely not to go back. And so it becomes one of those things where you have to consistently say, you're better than this. You're better than this. You can't keep doing this and people will not come. If you don't consistently remind people, and by the way, community theater people do read the reviews a lot, even if it's just because Aunt Susie's name is in it. And if you're not telling them honestly that they deserve to improve, they're not going to. What I've noticed, and I can't claim to be the orchestrator of it, but they also read the criticism and take it to heart. I've watched things improved in some community companies. I mean, you also get the hate mail, including that one that you ended up writing about too, that there was just this guy, I don't have any idea who it is, kept writing to me and telling me that I was just horrible and insulting me and how I obviously was out to torment people because I was ugly and never graduated from high school. I mean, it was always just crazy stuff. And it was like, you know, who is this person? I think I know now. But,
Well, I got that.
no,
No,
just
no
because
further
the rest of this company kind of went, oh, it's like, okay, they know who it is. But yeah, he's the same guy who produced the worst. I mean, it's not good on stage at any time, Rebecca, but the worst production of Rebecca it is possible to do. The person I took with me that night was in hysterics all night. I mean, it was so bad. And so I said so, and this guy wrote to me and told me I was never let to come to the theater again.
See, that's why I am like Jason. You want me in your audience because I am like a kid in a candy store. When I come in, I expect it to just be absolute brilliance.
Yeah.
And for me, even the stuff that's really bad, because it's theater, there's just something unique about the live experience of theater that I know at some point there's going to be a moment that's going to make it all worthwhile.
Oh, not
And
that
it's
one.
either going to be because it gets so bad that a few of us in the audience are going to start laughing hysterically. And then the people on stage will think, oh, we're doing really well. And that becomes even more enjoyable. But so, that's how I roll.
Or something weird will happen, like, you know, someone will jump off a stage and beat the crap out of someone. Yeah.
That's why I go to the theater, and I know it's going to be okay.
But I think that I've seen them get better over time because you're being honest. That's what I was trying to say. I just,
No, I have a question. My name is Jim Martica from Theater Unleashed, and this is directed especially for smaller companies like ourselves who have been developing over the past few years. It kind of hits on what you guys were saying at the beginning. We actually, a few weeks ago, had a bunch of people from different theater companies, kind of execs from different small theater companies talking about this exact issue, like what, basically the relevance of the Critic today, and we kind of came to the same conclusion you guys did. It's like, well, it's not necessarily there to fill the seats so much anymore, but it's definitely there to help us grow, especially the small theater companies, to help us figure out what we're doing right and wrong. And, you know, as a member of a company that has, you know, had some shows that have been very critically acclaimed and also that have been bashed, that is important. And so I guess on a quick little side note is like, that's, you know, I think you guys will always be relevant for that matter. And especially like this panel that you have up here, I'm so glad that you got these particular people, because you're right, there's a lot of shit out there when it comes to the critics as well. There's a lot of really shitty blogs, and you're like, this isn't doing anybody any service. So I'm glad you got some respected voices. My question, all of that being aside, is especially for the smaller theater companies, which are going to hit some growing pains, especially in their first few years, and there are so many of us out here, what can we do to basically to get noticed by, I mean, not to be patting you guys on the backs, but by the big players in town? You guys, when it comes to the, you know, criticism, you guys are the big players in town. What are some things you would encourage from the smaller theater companies to get noticed by you guys?
You know how the Visceral Theater Company got the highest rating on Bitter Lemons last year? They got the most reviews, almost, of any theater company in town. And one of the, who's their PR? Loathsome creature? I hate this guy. Drew Blakeman is one of the best PR men alive. And here's what he does. He finds out who you are as a critic. He writes you a personal email. He tells you that he knows who you are, and he got me to that fucking theater. He flattered me into that theater. Absolutely. I mean, it was easy.
So it's stroke the ego.
Yep. You tell them something about
That's
this.
why I was doing that at the beginning of this.
Right.
I had my pros on stage. Once again, Jim Martin, Theater Unleashed.
Yeah, but if you appeal directly to the person, right? You know, find out the personal emails and Facebook accounts. How hard is it of the people who you want to target?
Go to Bitter Lemons, do
Yeah.
some research,
Yep.
it's all there.
well, and the other thing I think is that, you know, I think that, well, actually, I'm just going to build off him. It's that sense of personal engagement is a way to get people out there. I had a situation in which there was a theater that is in the area that my newspapers always cover. Anything that shows up there, we're going to do. And I was in the process of asking, finding out where the publicist was. Again, there was another itinerant company coming in, and I reached the publicist and said, I'd like to come and see the show. And he said, well, you know, I don't know. Do you write for anything I have heard of? And so I said, well, yeah, that's why the tagline on all my emails is all the places I write for. You know, and he goes, oh, well, then I guess you can come. I said, well, you don't hurt yourself, but fortunately, but I have to because my editor wants me to do this. And so and then all of a sudden he got very nice. I guess he must have actually discovered Stage Strike Review actually exists.
Yeah.
So, but it was, you know, I gave the name of my editor and everything. She wants me to do this, so, you know, please let me come to this. Well, all right. Well, it was a pretty decent show. It wasn't, you know, fabulous, but it was okay. But it was like, yeah, I'm really going to want to do things for you. Who is this publicist? This is terrible. I mean, it's, you know, why would I want to do you any favors if you're going to say, well, I guess, if you're real. But then maybe that's protective based on all these quasi people who come in and claim to do stuff.
No, I mean,
To do. And I was in the process of asking, finding out where the publicist was. Again, it was another itinerant company coming in, and I reached the publicist and said, I'd like to come and see the show. And he said, well, you know, I don't know. Do you write for anything I'd have heard of? And so I said, well, yeah, that's why the tagline on all my emails is all the places I write for. You know, and he goes, oh, well, then I guess you can come. I was like, well, you don't hurt yourself, but fortunately, but I have to, because my editor wants me to do this. And so and then all of a sudden he got very nice. I guess he must have actually discovered Stage Direct Review actually exists. Yeah. So, but it was, you know, I gave the name of my editor and everything. She wants me to do this, so, you know, please let me come to this. Well, all right. Well, it was a pretty decent show. It wasn't, you know, fabulous, but it was okay. But it was like, yeah, I'm really going to want to do things for you. Now, who is his publicist? This is terrible. I mean, it's, you know, why would I want to do you any favors if you're going to say, well, I guess, if you're real. But then maybe that's protective based on all these quasi people who come in and claim to do stuff.
No, I mean, you value your work, you respect it, you should, yeah.
So wait, you weren't talking to the publicist, you were talking to the...
No, the publicist. It was the publicist. The publicist, yes. The publicist contacted my editor. I contacted the editor, said, you know, so I went kind of, well, I don't know. I don't even know who you are.
Quick follow-up, just a real quick follow-up to that, kind of very related to that. What are you looking for in terms of the productions? And what would you like to see in terms of productions from these smaller companies?
Surprises.
You can be a little more specific.
I want to see fewer things that look like I already saw them on basic cable. I want to see fewer issue plays, fewer plays of identity, personally, and more plays about the human condition. I want to see more plays about people who have problems, not necessarily that I have, but whose struggles to overcome them inspire me universally. I want to see Jack climb the beanstalk. I am sick of Jack standing at the bottom of the beanstalk saying, my mother wasn't nice to me. She threw away my beans. This is bad. This is bad for us. We are here to create mythologies. You, sir, are here to create a mythology that is going to inspire me to be a better person. And so if you tell me at the outset that if my humble origins are such that I'm sort of stunted, but I can still form a support group, that's maybe the most I can hope for in this life. Fuck you. Stop making theater.
I like plays that really take full advantage of the medium of theatre. So they're inventive staging, or they're creative, and they tell beautiful stories, and they're well acted, and they're beautifully staged. I mean, you know, stories deserve the right medium for telling that story. So a novel works as a novel, you know, a film works as a film. Theatre, I want to see theatre. When I come to the theatre, I want to see theatre. I don't want to see, like Jason said, I don't want to see TV.
Yeah. Hey, so my name is Eric Rudnick. Some of you have come to see my plays in the past. Thank you for that. This is so useful and really a great thing to have, this kind of dialogue. I'm wondering what you all think, and if there's anything that can be done about the amount of what theaters, the larger theaters talking about from the Geffen and the Douglas on up, what their responsibility is in highlighting new works, especially by Los Angeles playwrights, because I went to the Geffen a couple of, like a year or two ago, and they proudly said in their program, we are developing 9 plays with Neil LaBute. And I thought, can you develop 2 plays with Neil LaBute and develop a play with Cat Powers? And sort of, you know, it's, I mean, this is how people go from being known to being known. And I think when companies like Rogue Machine and the Echo do consistently good work, that those playwrights who are creating that work, who are sitting down to a blank piece of paper and a blank computer screen every day, and they actually get something going that's good, there's just this kind of, well, it's been done in Los Angeles already. Or, I mean, the theaters, I think, themselves are complicit in presenting theater that's unexciting because they want something that's proven or something like that. They're going, a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, they seem to be going in a safe direction. I can't tell you how many times how many productions of How I Learned to Drive there have been since I moved to Los Angeles. It's just, it's not fair to the theater goers.
Other desert cities.
It's not risky, and it's also not nurturing any kind of Los Angeles theater voice. People are like, well, Chicago has a voice as a city in theater. New York has a voice. Well, the reason Los Angeles doesn't have as much, it's not that there's less theater. It's that these theaters are very interested in white dead babies that died just before the play started.
Banked. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sick of that as a premise too. One of the problems that LA has though
That's the plan.
is that writers who come to Los Angeles to write are in the town, in the world where you can get paid the most to write, and it's not writing for theater. So that's one of the handicaps of Los Angeles as a
Well, and if
paradigm.
you do get paid, it's for writing a Lifetime movie, and that's also a problem.
Yeah, and
Pablo himself.
And the people who are writing Lifetime movies tend to write less interesting plays afterward, I find.
Yes. Yes.
I think that this happened to, what's his name, that guy that wrote, I'm never going to remember his name. Anyway, there's a bunch of these guys that write for acronym detective TV shows and are buying houses in the Palisades who used to be interesting playwrights. I think that's part of the answer.
I think the Pasadena Playhouse, the model for Stoneface is a pretty good one, and it's much too rare.
Yes, be married to French Stewart. That helps. That helps a playwright tremendously.
Well, but I think
But he had not, Sheldon Epps had not read, he didn't even see the production of Sacred Fools. He read the script and said he would do it. And that's, sarcasm aside, that was a brave thing to do. Financially, they're under huge strains economically, these large theaters. That's why the work sucks. That's why the casts are so small. That's why there's the lack of bravery. So for whatever reason, anytime you can take a playwright from a small theater and just move it to a larger theater, whereas I think Vanessa Close said herself, in 1 week of the run of the Pasadena Playhouse, more people saw that play than the entire extended run of Sacred Fools. That's significant.
This is, I agree with you to an extent, but it's not just sarcasm to mention that French Stewart came with that package.
Oh, absolutely.
That script did not sell itself to the Pasadena Playhouse.
We do live in the real world. I mean,
Yes.
So, again, you should attach a star to your project in this example.
Yeah, well, but not always. I think that one of the, it has been true that if you have a production that's been seen in a small theater that has a great richness to it, that can be brought into and restaged in a larger framework. I was thinking of the Death West Big River, for example, that was brought up into the Taper, given the kind of big money treatment, which it absolutely deserved. I think it was killed by taking it to proscenium theaters, but that's a whole other thing. The idea of taking works and bringing them up gives a chance for a known and yet expandable or enrichable thing to come up there. The biggest problem, actually, having been writing about theater in Los Angeles for as long as I have, is been noticing the problem that any of these large theaters have with the fact that they must placate their long-term, loyal, profound subscription base, and that they have a thing they want. And
Oklahoma!
not necessarily, actually, that's what's kind of interesting, is that, but they have a thing they want. And if that thing, if you're trying to branch, if you're trying to pull up, if you're trying to do different stuff in that space, then what you run into is the difference between what you are now trying to do in that space. I think of Susie Dietz at the Pasadena Playhouse. She was trying to create a whole new environment there, and the Playhouse at that time simply wasn't ready for it. And the vast majority of the subscribers were the people who'd been waiting on tenterhooks for it to reopen for like 20 years. And had gone there, or their friends had gone there, or their parents went there, and they had this sense of what the Pasadena Playhouse was supposed to be. And she came in to be radically different, to try and create new work, and they just went, and she started the whole thing as a project with a guy who wanted to do Oklahoma. And the big argument between the two of them, he left, she ended up in that space, and I really liked her when I had discussions with her, but it just wasn't a fit with people. There was a guy doing something in a small theater there who coined a great thing. He says, there are people for whom the Pasadena Playhouse is a religion. And it didn't fit with the faith. And so you find the same thing as we've adjusted out of the Gordon Davidson period at the Taper, in that it's become a very different space, and the trying to play fast and loose with that base has been difficult for them. This is not an excuse. It's simply a reason. It's a thing that gets in the way.
It has. They didn't do very many new plays at the Taper, and in the very first 5 years they did a ton of world premieres and American premieres, but that stopped very quickly. So I'm not sure that the DNA of that place has changed significantly under.
Yeah, we got about 5 minutes. I want to throw one anecdote out that touches on what you said, Eric. I have a play that I've been developing for the last year that literally has Ed Asner attached to it, right? And I did a couple of readings, had a lot of people see it. Ed Asner's attached, and they read it, and she was like, too many characters, too many characters.
Too expensive to
Too expensive, the budgets, too many characters. I was like, that's it? It's like, that's the whole reading. She's like, basically. And then she came and saw the reading and was like, this is hilarious. This is like, there's a mystery. I was like, yeah, I know. So, and I caught them right when they were open, and she was very interested, and they were, you know, it was like, it was perfect time to pick the show for the season. Too many characters. 5 and under. 5 characters under. And I was like, wow, that's the reason my play doesn't get up at the Colony Theater. So there you go. But another question? Anybody?
Well, actually, I just wanted to say back to you, Eric. I mean, I'm just as disappointed as you that the Geffen would, you know, commission or produce 8 plays by Neil LaBute and none by, you know, John Polono or Ken Powers or any number of women playwrights here. So, but what do we? I don't know what to do about that.
There may not be anything to do, but stop going to see these shows. And I don't want to not see something I've not seen before. I went to see South Pacific because they don't stage South Pacific that much, and it was great. But then I went and saw Glass Menagerie, and it was fantastic. The one with Judith Ivey, and I was so glad that I saw it. So I mean, I'm not saying don't do old work, but I'm saying that there seems to be this safety valve on a lot of these theaters where they just it's almost like they don't go see theater.
Yeah.
You know,
Very
like
much like.
Too busy doing it to go see it, yeah, I know.
yeah, the artistic directors I don't think do go see local theater because there's so much good. I mean, yeah, there's some bad stuff out there, but I think Echo, Rogue Machine, and Sacred Fools are theaters that really take interesting chances and are constantly throwing stuff out there. And one plays as good as the last, but completely different. And that's who I'm trying to call. That's who I'll always go see.
So the lessons we're going to get from this: do good, surprising work and flatter your critics.
Thank you all so much for coming.
Get out! Well, you can grab some stuff, bitter lemon stuff if you want. It's all free if you want to grab it.